Welcome back, everybody. My name's Danny Alvarez, and this is
Gino Collura,
also known as Dr. Gino Collura. He'll make sure to tell you that, it is a PhD, he'll tell you.
Let's make sure he can say my last name right first, but that's okay. Yeah.
This is Unstoppable Me, Unfiltered Me.
Unfiltered. Come on, Alvarez. Unfiltered, son.
It's everything you want that is starting with an un.
Yes, absolutely. And there's lots of uns that you and I have to share, particularly today.
I know. It's fun doing this, isn't it, though?
It is, man. I missed this.
I did. I miss this a lot.
I missed this chapter. I mean, this is a new chapter, right? Elevated chapter. I mean, look around. Some state-of-the-art stuff we've got now.
We may have upgraded a little bit.
A smidge. But I feel like truly the culmination of time, right, that has gone by, the years that have gone by, the experiences that we've garnered, the losses that we have endured, which, a little hint about what we're going to dive into today, right?
Which is?
What have we learned from the losses, right? What has been the impact, the significance of the losses? Because, man, I can tell you from soup to nuts, right, since the last time you and I were in front of mics having these conversations to now, man, the hits have been real.
Oh, yeah.
Right? They have been real. So man, let's start off with that, right? In your journey, right? Lessons learned from the losses, right? So opportunities missed, expectations that were set, you didn't meet the expectations or didn't exceed. Because look, you and I, we don't meet expectations, we surpass expectations. That is the code of which we follow.
That's right.
But it doesn't always work out that way.
No, and in fact, it's when it doesn't work out that way is when we learn and we grow the most. That is, as our kids get older, right? Like Tony is now, the old T-Bird. I'm sorry if everybody knows him as the old T-Bird.
T-Bird.
He's now 20. He's running around Washington, D.C., like interning.
My man's in D.C., big time.
I remember like when we first would watch him and you watch your kid stumble and fall, you're like, man, I really want to fix that. You know what I mean? Because it hurt. And then you realize you can't do it.
That's right.
Like when they're crying, when they're hurting, you can't. Because the greatest lessons in life for me, and I know that something similar for you, is when we fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I may have a history of winning at life. It seems like it from the outside. And you'll hear people say that all the time. Oh, it's easy for you, bud. Life comes easy for you. You're super successful. I'm like, maybe if you actually...
Let's define super successful.
If you actually look at the record, success is literally defined in how you view your success and how you take it in by the veracity and the totality of your failures. And if you're not looking at your failures that way, we need to change your filter and your focus.
Okay, so much here, right? So on the neurological side, on the psychological side, and the meaning-making side. So I think what's really important about that is this, right? Failure and loss. Coping and coming out of failure and loss is a skill set. Right?
Yeah.
And I want to be real clear about this, right? Because when I say it's a skill set, right, there's a particular frame of mind that you need to be in, right? To not let that moment of failure or loss be a defining element in how it is you perceive yourself when you look at yourself in the mirror, right? There's the whole notion of lean into the sharper points of life. Well, failure and loss is absolutely a sharper point, right? I mean, if we're on the highway, we're cruising at 70, 75 miles an hour, right? And all of a sudden, you've got a really sharp curve that comes up. You're not going to be going 70, 75 miles an hour. You got to slow down. You have to slow down the operational tempo and take in, this is what this feels like. And you know what? It really doesn't feel good, but there's so much for us to learn along the way within that point where we have to slow down, right? I'll give you an example as a father for me. I cannot tell you how many times my 4-year-old, right? She'll ride her bike, and she's learning how to get off training wheels right now, right? So, man, I'm behind her. She's making me get my cardio in because she's going up and down the road with her training wheels.
Nobody, can we just pause?
Yeah.
Nobody watching this actually believes you right now because you said, I do cardio.
Yeah,
but go ahead. Tell us a cute story about the 4-year-old.
Just for the audience's sake, let's just take it back, right? Because, ladies and gentlemen, on the way into the studio today, I had to ask my wonderful counterpart why he was breathing hard coming up one flight of stairs. I'm still trying to figure that one out, but
because I keep carrying the weight of...
Oh, you're carrying the weight of something.
All right, go back to the 4-year-old.
So long on the short, look, she falls. First thing I want to do is go pick her up and comfort her and console her. But then I have to remind myself she is in such a formidable... I mean, she's 4, right? She's a baby. But she is in such a formidable stage of saying, look, this happened. This does not feel good. I don't want this to happen again. But every time it happens, there's a learning point of what she did wrong or what didn't work that she shouldn't repeat. She shouldn't do again. And that's the big thing here, right? It's gonna happen, but make sure it doesn't happen again. So it's an incredibly valuable point for me as a father to sit there and say, I can't coddle her and assure her every single step, every single time it happens. I have to make sure that she is garnering that sense of self-confidence to make sure that, look, it's going to happen. When it does happen, how you make sense of it and the skill that comes along with that failure, it doesn't have to be a hero end all. It's just one step in your journey.
So like when you're on stage and we're doing these things, like you ever see people like they're listening and it's impacting, and do you ever look at them and go, if they actually like knew the me that it took to get to this stage, they may not think we're so far apart. Give me a story. Give me an example of like one time you got your teeth crushed.
Yesterday.
We didn't have to go to the Wayback Machine.
I mean, no, 100%. This happens all the time, right? And this reinforces the idea of it being a skill set. Look, on stage yesterday, right, presenting to an amazing crowd of folks and leaders. And I'm up there and I'm talking. And as I am talking, I'm literally looking into the crowd. And I feel like half the crowd is with me. And I feel like the other half of the crowd is like, dude, just shut up already.
Right.
Right. Well, listen, when you do what you and I do and we have these opportunities to serve in that capacity, that's a big deal for us.
Sure.
Right. It's not so much, it's not the fear of public speaking and being on stage. Like we do fine there, right? It's really making sure, are we squeezing every ounce of juice in this opportunity to get our message across effectively? Look, man, half the time I was up there, I felt like I was failing miserably. Fast forward to the end of it. Had a line of folks come up to me afterwards, right? And thanking.
So it was life-changing, right?
Life-changing,
yeah.
right? Right. So like, and that's another thing, perception. It's not always what you think, right? Failure and loss in that moment in time, massive suckfest, right? But that right there is just a snapshot. Don't hold on to it. And I think that's a big challenge of many folks, including myself. We hold on to it. We ruminate on it over and over and over again. It's just not productive.
You know, I've said this a bunch of times. Whenever I'm winning too much, I'm actually super nervous.
I get that.
I get ultra uncomfortable because like the failure, and when you crash and you burn, that's when my energy's in. That's when I'm locked in. That's when I'm pissed off. That's when I'm rocking, and I'm gonna crush everything in front of me. I think as we mature, when I'm not calling us mature, but what I'm saying as we grow, we figure out how to harness the discipline required that failure gives you, right? So failure gives you this motivation to grow if you channel it right. And as you grow in life, you start to do the same thing, but sometimes without the failure having moved it, just your own discipline and fear of returning to that failure is what gets you moving.
Okay, so in the world of behavioral science, right? Very, very simple phrase. Make the harder choice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What do I mean by make the harder choice? Our brains don't like making hard choices. It does not like it. You know what our brains love? Comfort.
Path of least resistance.
Right? Repetition.
Yep.
Right? Things that I am familiar with, I already know. I want to do it over and over and over again. Well, you and I both know that's not where growth happens. Growth happens when you push yourself beyond the limitations that you set for yourself. The bigger question is, are you open enough to make hard choices and have the discipline, right, to commit to those hard choices every single time you are met with adversity, you are met with failure? That's a massive difference. That's a massive mindset shift. 12,000 to 60,000 thoughts a day is what this thing produces. 90% of those thoughts, same thoughts as yesterday, 80% of those thoughts are negative. 80% of those thoughts are negative. Dude, that's staggering.
Right.
Make the choice, right? When you are failing, when you lose, instead of getting caught up in that 80%, and let's say it jumps to 85 or 90 in that moment, imagine if you went backwards. Instead of it's 80, now let me drop it to 75 or 70. You want to talk about power.
That's right.
That is power. You want to be talk about unstoppable? That's being unstoppable because you're breaking the norm of how it is that behavior interacts with others and our environment, especially when dealing with failure.
You know what's funny is like you something you're saying now, it realize like generationally, it's how you also deal with the failure. For my middle son, my youngest son, it sometimes makes him collapse.
Sure.
He can't handle the fact that he had a task and he went to do it. And so building the resiliency inside him to go, all right, listen, guy, listen, it went wrong. you're not. Are you alive? I always like to say, is anyone shooting at you? Is anyone taking your food? You're doing great. Okay, you're doing great.
Are we talking about Lincoln?
We're talking about Lincoln. Yes.
All right.
He is 11, right? So
I was going to say, let's get some context.
yeah,
Right?
he
Yes.
is 11. But sincerely, so I remember when I ran for judge.
Yeah, I remember.
All right.
Yeah.
And for me, there was no doubt I was winning that. I remember even being asked to leave that race because they're like, you're going to win that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I lost, think about this. We live in a county of 1.5 million people. We had ads on TV. We had.
Oh, you went hard.
We went.
Oh,
yes.
We
had stuff everywhere. And then they're like, yeah, you're not the judge. You're the loser who didn't get it, And then you still had to go out in public, and you still had to go out. And I said, I'm never going to run for office again. That was like a pretty debasing kind of experience. It was really rough.
Yes.
And then I realized that I really hated losing, and I didn't take the losing well. How you lose shows your character.
Absolutely.
We know that. But what I'm saying is, I was like, I never want to feel this again. And if I feel this again, it's because I know that I left everything on the table and to be fair, if we were doing the proper after action review,
Sure.
I didn't do everything I could do to do that. And then I realized when I ran for office the next time, I was like, I'm never going to feel that again.
Oh, no. Listen,
ever.
And kudos to you because, listen, from knocking on doors to umpteen meetings you went to, I mean, you made sure of it. But that's, I think, an incredibly valuable nugget, right, from a takeaway perspective when dealing with loss, right? Applying what is learned to make sure it doesn't happen again. I think that from a principle perspective, right, the actionable item behind loss, behind suffering, behind adversity, is that it's going to be a part. It's a part of every single one of our lives.
Right.
And it's never going to stop. It's always going to happen. The question is, how do you make sure that after every occurrence, you take away everything you can to make yourself better, sharper, stronger to deal with adversity and challenge in the future that much easier.
Are you ready?
Hit me.
So you lost, you jump back into the arena, you fix the things you thought, and you lose again. Now what? How do you handle that? Like, what do you tell somebody?
Mm-hmm. So think of it this way. Is there a roadmap to life?
No.
No. Who has it figured out?
Not us.
Not us, right? Nobody does. The question there is from an organic perspective. Are you willing to take the hits and keep going?
Right.
You go down, awesome, man. Guess what? At the end of the day, that is the suck. That is the part of this life that nobody ever wants to talk about. We don't talk about on social media. You don't see everyone posting, right, the parts of their life that are in complete shambles and darkness. And guess what? Everybody has those chapters. Everybody, if you were to think of the mind as a hotel, how many rooms would be in that hotel?
Right. Tons.
It's limitless.
Right.
And a good chunk of those are not so pretty. Right? They're not very nice. But the question is, are you willing to bust out the flashlight and shine it into the darkness?
Yeah.
So many of us are not, but you can.
So I have a friend who's getting divorced, and remember, I used to practice divorce law, and so it was really, as a divorce attorney, sometimes you're more psychologist than you are attorney.
Sure.
Who gets married to get divorced? Nobody. Like, in fact, you're there and you're like, I swear for the rest of my life, I'm going to do this.
Of course, yeah.
And so they pour in and they go, is it me? Mm-hmm. Is it him? Is it her? It can't be me, right? Or is it me? And so that journey, watching that journey, as today I was kind of counseling a friend of mine, her question is, how did I get here? And the answer for me to her was, it's not so much how you got there, right? It's what are you going to do from there, right? So you have to look back and go, and be honest with yourself. What did I do along the way, right, to get me in a position where we end up here, right? What kind of a partner was I? What didn't I get? What didn't I give? Like, remember, it's two people in that one. But truly, it is one of those things where the infallibility that you think you had, right? Like, you thought, like, well, we're perfect. It's this smooth ride. It's an active thing. And maybe.
Oh, yeah.
Look, I value my wife right now in ways that I never would have understood, right? And so we always joke around like this. We always say, I wish I would have met you sooner. And I've thought about that because I wish I like for whatever the life I have left, you know what I mean, will not be enough to spend with her, right? But I will tell you that you say to yourself, dang, I wish I would have met her sooner so that I could have more life. But you realize the Danny that found her
Wasn't ready for her.
it wasn't that guy because I had to get my teeth crushed. And then I had to understand the value of me. Okay, because you have to love yourself first.
Absolutely.
You have to figure out who you are first
Always.
before you're going to go give to anything else, whether that's your job, your wife, your kids. It does. So there wasn't this guy for her waiting for her 10 years ago. Like there was a completely different guy. And so it's interesting to watch through our own failures. You know what I mean? Like having been divorced, having like had your whole life, go up in shambles, you really go, man, do I suck at this thing? And you just realize it's legitimately part of the experience. But now that I'm on the other side, I realize it's those small intangibles like tapping her and reminding her, it's these little things that where you like make sure you say, I love
exactly
you. You know
right.
what I mean? It really matters.
It's the moments where you think there's not a lot of value. Those moments contain all the value.
Oh yeah.
Right? That's the cohesion, man. Like that's the jelly in the peanut butter and jelly. And I think of the same thing with my wife. I mean, she and I joke about it all the time in a similar fashion. I wish I would have met her sooner, but at the same time, we never in a million years, right, would be where we are at now.
Right.
And so the timing was very much important, right? Where I was in my journey, where she was at in her journey. But to have more time, right, would be amazing. But as it is now, because here's the thing. And look, I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. My journey and path to fatherhood and seeing her walk her path in motherhood, just you want to talk about opening up a whole nother chapter of love and appreciation, right? And growth and what that means and what that looks like. And as a partner, you look at that and it's like, sometimes truly, like I look at her and I'm like, I really need to level up. Like she brings it, right? And it's an awesome thing because it's an incredible motivator to continuously make each other better. Because like there are times, I mean, Danny, I've been blessed to have incredible parents, right? So have you, right?
Oh, yeah.
But when you look at the long term of what that means, that expectation that is set, and of course, look, there's always going to be things you're going to want to do differently, right? With your kids, no one's perfect, no parents are perfect. But when I look at that journey and the partner that I have in it, and the failures that I have experienced up to this point, the things that I am grateful for and thankful for, like maintaining that attitude of gratitude, even in the failure.
Oh yeah.
Oh, right. I mean, that is juice. Like that is very, very important to do and to hold on to that. Be like, look, even though this is an absolute suck fest right now, and I dropped the ball completely, I'm grateful that you're in this with me. I'm grateful for the opportunity to experience it. Because without this experience, I wouldn't have the growth opportunity on the other side. And look, I may even stumble and fall again. More than likely, it's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And so that is such an important facet and an important element that I think everybody can relate to. Because look, it happens to all of us on a regular basis, whether it's parenthood, your job, friendship, dating, it doesn't matter. It's part of the human condition.
Yeah, totally. There's times where again, we kind of touched on at the beginning. People are like, "Oh, Danny, you got your stuff together." I'm like, I think you don't get like you're looking at like one of the biggest failures like you've ever seen, And I happily admit that. That is like part of how I got here. Hell, I failed college. I've never. Everyone's like, "Oh, you're an attorney." I was like, I don't know how that happened. I don't even know how I got here. I've told you this story. I remember when my mom drove all the way to New Orleans.
This is gold. Yeah.
She drove all the way. I was like in my fraternity house, sitting in my, in the fraternity uniform, which is like no shirt, tan flip flops,
Nice.
Your short, your khaki shorts, and some dude's like, "Hey, your mom is here." Some lady said your mom is here.
Came
And I
to
was
pay
like,
you a visit.
and I was like, well, that's impossible because she lives in Miami. Like, tell that person they're crazy. They're like, no, dude, that's your mom. So I go downstairs and I was like, oh, hey, mom. And she says, get in the car. You're done. Like, you tried. You're done. I was like, I don't know if you know this, mom, but you can't tell me what to do. I'm 20 years old now, okay? So she's like, oh, mijo, you think you're old now? I was like, tell that to your grandmother. She's in the car. And I looked.
Game over.
And I was like,
it's game over.
Let me go get my bag real quick. Let me get my bag. And so it was literally the drive of shame, the 18-hour drive back from New Orleans. I left tons of stuff there. I literally just left.
Oh, Baba, that's a get up and go.
That's a get up and
You're
go.
not taking your time. Oh, what is there? No, you're not. No.
So
sorry.
I got all summer to hide, right? Because like all kids are off. But then like when everyone started going back to school, I had like no plan. No plan whatsoever. And that was like,
oh man,
transformation. Now look, your family is an immigrant family. So is mine. We're first generation Americans. And I'm sitting here going, my grandfather with a 6th grade education came to America and worked as a carpenter so that we could like have all this stuff. And I just crapped all over it, you know? And so that was a wake-up moment, that failure. That was the shame,
Yeah.
The failure, I'm looking around like now I went to a high school like where everyone was like uber successful.
Yeah.
And I am like,
oh yeah.
I think I'm going to go be a diesel mechanic, which now I realize I would have made a lot of money. You know what I mean? Like, if I could have been a diesel mechanic, I'd have made a lot of money now. But like then, like the only thing that showed success was if you graduated from a college. You know what I mean?
You know what's fascinating? We're sitting here talking about failure, right? I have to bring this up. It's the first and only job I was fired from, right?
Oh God.
Oh yeah. Oh, this is gold, right? So 16 years old, and on the summertime, I would do 1 or 2 jobs. I would either go help my uncle roof, right? Which hats off to everybody who's out there in that profession, especially in the state of Florida, or I would do pool construction, right? Well, my boss, who I did pool construction with, I mean, look, I'm a 16-year-old kid, man. I'm digging ditches, or I'm helping him with plumbing or set tile or whatever the case is. But I had this tendency, I mean, we are Cuban, right? So running on time is not exactly one of our strong suits.
Not one of our things.
No, it's not one of our strong suits.
Not one of our things.
Not one of our strong suits. So I show up to the work site one day. I'm like 15, 20 minutes late. And he looks at me and goes, "What are you doing here?" "I'm here for work, sir." He goes, "No, you're not. You're fired."
Really?
Now, mind you, that walk of shame, I mean, I get into my vehicle and I'm shaking because I have to go tell my parents now, right? like, I'm not even worried about me getting fired. I'm like, I have to go have this conversation with mom and with dad. Well, unbeknownst to me, he had called them.
Oh, no
before
way.
he fired me and gave them the heads up. And my dad was like,
Perfect.
Absolutely. He needs to learn, right? I get home, crickets. Not a sound, not a peep. I'm like, oh, this is going to be so bad. This is going to be so bad. And I'll never forget, my old man, he came up to me, he sat down, and he goes, "So I heard you had a day." I said, "Yes, sir, I did." He goes, "What'd you learn?" I said, "Not to be late." He goes, "That's exactly right." He goes, "You know what being on time is?" I said, "No, sir, what's that?" He goes, 15 minutes early. From now on, right? But the whole point is that, man, I took that hit, and even here I am, right, almost 40 years old, and that hit still sticks with me. Now I'm still working on the 10 to 15 minutes early.
I was very surprised you were here on time.
Yeah, that's funny because I got here first, but that's
I know,
okay.
That's my point.
Yeah, but it's an amazing thing how certain things, whether it's something as minuscule as that, right, or something so much bigger in life, the stains that they leave, right? But again, what do we do with the stain? What's the skill set of resiliency that you have cultivated within yourself to grow and push back, to continuously make harder choices, even when the circumstances are hard as it is?
Gee, when we're doing team building, like in the business world, what do you tell? So, like in business, you can't fail on a regular basis.
No,
because the point is profit,
yes.
right? So, what do you tell like a team leader or a business when they've failed? And we're here telling them, hey, encourage the failure. Like in life, encourage the failure.
Lean into it.
And now what?
So this is a very important thing, especially when you're looking at team dynamics when it comes to performance. So one important thing for everybody who's listening in to write this down, right? Yerkes-Dodson law.
Wait, what?
Yerkes-Dodson. I know it's a mouthful. Yerkes. Yerkes-Dodson. D-O-D-S-O-N. Yerkes-Dodson law. Yerkes-Dodson law is a psychological principle. It's a very simple psychological principle, and it says this: optimal levels of performance, meaning high speed rocking and rolling, happen at intermediate levels of drive. What does that mean? What that means is not low, not high, but right smack in the middle. All we're saying is balanced drive, balanced motivation. When you look at that failure that has happened in business, where were things off kilter? Where was there misalignment? And 9 times out of 10, that misalignment stems from miscommunication. And that miscommunication is tied to some sort of information that wasn't shared or embodied the right way. When I say embodied, I mean just how it was digested. They didn't digest it and apply it the way in which you had hoped that they would have, which goes to expectation management. But in the world of team dynamics, clarity of communication to get to a place of equilibrium for that drive is everything. So the short answer, right, for your question is, when you're coming out of that failure, what has to be recalibrated to make sure that alignment has been fostered with your team? That's the thing. I think 90% of the folks that we get the opportunity to work with, their biggest challenge is misalignment, right? Whatever the vision is, whatever the values are, they're not shared. Everyone has their own agenda. They're trying to go after their own thing. How do you bring that together? Well, what's the definition of leadership? It's your ability to influence others to achieve a common objective. How well are you influencing them? Well, how well you're influencing them is completely predicated on how well you're communicating with them. What does that mean? How well are you sharing information to build community?
So there's one point that I think is important to understand is failure and honesty got to go hand in hand. So you can be like, oh, we failed. It's okay. Lean into it. And then if you repeat the same processes, right, and you do not do a fair analysis of what happens, then you're destined to repeat. And then that's not a failure problem. That's a leadership problem.
Facts.
So I remember as a young lieutenant, I was always told, hey, if your team fails to perform, it's not their fault. It's your fault. And I was like, what do you mean it's their fault? If I train them, right? And if I pour into them all the standards, tasks, and conditions that you told me, then it's their fault, right? And that's just not true, right? It just doesn't work that way.
Sure.
After every action, like all great teams, the top tier performers, after every action, even the successful ones, they pull everyone together.
That's right.
And they do a hot wash.
That's exactly
right. We call it an after-action review. I still call it that in every company I've ever run or every business I've ever been a part of. And we literally say, each person tell me 3 things that you would improve and 3 things that you would sustain, right? Because if you tell me that we executed a plan and it went perfectly, then you are not being honest.
That is correct.
Right? So that characteristic, right? You can't have failure without honesty. That characteristic is vital to the improvement of teams, but it's vital to the improvement of a leader. So so we've talked about being in relationships. We talked about being teams, but we often talk about leading yourself first, right? If you can't lead yourself, you cannot be expected to lead others. Are you being honest with yourself? Remember when we go to the gym?
That's a surprise to me that you actually. Listen. Wow. I feel like it may have been 4 or 5 years, bro. But that's okay.
I don't know. Has anyone ever heard of 23% body fat? Cue here. So, the weights don't lift themselves.
Facts. Yes.
But the only person you're lying to is yourself, right?
That's exactly
you can be like, oh, I got this Crunch membership, or I go to this thing and I'm drinking my creatine.
That's right.
That's awesome, bro. That's great.
Are you putting in the work?
What does it matter to me if you're in shape or not, right? You're only lying to yourself.
That's right.
And the same goes to your team and your discipline. So you can say all of the right things, right? But if you're not being honest,
that's exactly
and you're not like just shredding the reality of what just happened, you will never get to lean in and grow.
That's right. And I think that there's a proactive nature that has to be respected and established. Look, if you know the storm's coming, and you never mention that the storm is on the way to your team.
That's right.
And then you just wait. And so many people say, it's not my problem. Like, I'm not in leadership. Wrong. Everybody is in leadership.
That's right.
Right. And to your point, it starts with self-leadership, but there's also a very real ripple effect. And in a time where society and people have become more narcissistic than ever because of things like social media, and it has absolutely become a me show, we have forgotten that. And everyone's like, look, I don't want that liability. I'm not going to carry that, but it's not that at all. It's a question of what is the objective, what is the mission that you are seeking to serve. And if you are not falling into alignment to make sure that happens, you've got no business being on that team in the first place.
That's
and you really have to question your motives because look, there's a big difference between being self-aware and then being on the path to self-mastery. And a lot of people do not understand the difference between the two, and there's a very real difference.
That's a great point. All right, recap. Your points today.
My points, all right? So first and foremost, getting through failure, making the harder choice is a skill set. It has to be practiced. If you are going through and just expecting things to line up, expecting things to get better, and you're not willing to put into work, to your point, that's a problem. We have to start there. Next part of that is when you are going down the journey of self-awareness, to do that inventory of, man, like, okay, so this didn't work out, but why didn't it work out? If you're not pulling the points that actually apply to the problem and you're willing and able to do something about it, that's a failure point of itself. And that is unacceptable. And you should carry yourself to a higher standard.
That's awesome. And I think you hit it on the point. Failure is a growth word, not a bad word. Failure is what we should expect, but failure with the conditions of you being honest, that's vital. So I'm Danny. That's Gino, 23% body fat. This is Unstoppable Me, Unfiltered. We'll see you next time.